They used to say in Willow Creek, a mother's heart may forgive, but it never forgets. And for Alice Horn, those words would one day become both prophecy and punishment. It had been 3 quiet years since her husband passed, and the house on Maple Street had settled into the rhythm of widowhood. Slow mornings, clock chimes, the gentle hum of the kettle. Alice was 68, silver hair always pinned neatly, a woman who had known routine longer than she'd known rest. Her life was small but steady. A pension check every month, a garden out back where marigolds still bloomed, and a photo of her son Christopher, framed beside her late husband's flag from the factory union hall. Christopher had been her pride, her only son, her reason for staying strong when the world fell apart. At 35, he was supposed to have found his footing, maybe start a family, buy a house, build something. But instead life had become one misstep after another. Failed ventures, broken promises, and grand ideas that never survived a single season. When he called one Sunday evening, voice soft and syrupy through the phone, she felt that familiar ache, the kind mothers confused for hope. "Mom," he said, "you shouldn't be worrying about bills anymore. You've done enough. Let me take care of things now." Alice smiled into the receiver, her hands trembling around her tea. "Oh, Chris, you've got your own life. I'm fine, fine. You shouldn't have to log into online banking or deal with paperwork. I can move your pension into a safer investment. High yield, low risk. My friend Foster manages these accounts for retirees all the time. You'll thank me later." It was the "you'll thank me later" that convinced her. He'd sounded so confident, so much like his father in those rare days before the sickness. Within a week, Christopher had moved back home, or so he said, just for a bit. He fixed light bulbs that didn't need fixing, drove her to appointments, and charmed her friends at church. Everyone adored him. "Alice, your son's a gem," they'd say, watching him carry grocery bags with a grin that looked like care. But the truth was, he was studying her, her passwords, her papers, her trust. "Mom, I'll handle the bills from now on," he said one afternoon, setting his laptop on the table. "You just relax, okay?" She hesitated, looking at the faint line between his brows. "Are you sure, sweetheart, that pension account is all I've got?" He reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "And now it's our future, you and me. Dad would want that." It was enough to make her sign. He filled out the forms quickly, too quickly, smiling as he guided her hand over dotted lines she didn't bother to read. "Just routine stuff," he assured her. "We'll get you paperless statements, easier for everyone." When he walked out that night, her bank folder in his briefcase, Alice sat on the couch, staring at the empty teacup he'd left behind. She didn't know it yet, but that cup marked the last quiet night she'd ever have in that house. For a while things seemed fine. Bills were paid, groceries arrived, and the lights stayed on. But something about Christopher changed. He started dressing sharper, tailored jackets, gold cufflinks, new sneakers that gleamed white as snow. He smelled of cologne, she couldn't pronounce. "Big meeting tomorrow," he'd say with a wink, heading out before dawn. "Foster and I are about to close something big." Alice believed him because that's what mothers do when belief is all they've got left. Then one morning she walked into the kitchen to find an envelope addressed to account holder Alice Horn. It was a letter from Evergreen Pension Services, marked important. She reached for her reading glasses and slid it open. Her breath caught halfway through the page. Balance $4,216. Previous balance $92,000. The room tilted. She blinked, thinking it must be a mistake, maybe a system glitch, maybe an accounting error. But deep down, beneath the layers of denial, something in her chest whispered a truth she didn't want to hear. She waited until Christopher returned that evening. His car, a black BMW with tinted windows, gleamed under the porch light. He whistled as he walked in, tossing his keys onto the counter. "Mom, guess what? Foster just landed a new client. We're celebrating tonight." Alice swallowed hard. "Chris, did you move my pension money?" He froze for half a second, before grinning. "Of course not. It's in a holding fund. You'll get it back with profits soon. You don't understand how investments work." She nodded slowly, heart sinking. He spoke to her like she was a child, like she hadn't raised him, sacrificed for him, believed in him when no one else would. Later that night, as the sound of his laughter drifted in from the driveway, loud, careless, surrounded by friends, she stood at the window watching. Her son, the boy she once held through fevers and fears, now stepping out of a car she'd unknowingly paid for. The same saying echoed again in her mind, low and haunting, "A mother's heart may forgive, but it never forgets." She didn't know what she'd do yet, but she knew one thing. The next time she looked him in the eyes, she'd see him for what he truly was. Not her little boy, but her biggest mistake. By mid-autumn, the widow's house had grown quieter than usual. The clock still chimed every hour. The kettle still whistled, but Alice Horne barely heard them. Her thoughts stayed heavy, caught between disbelief and dread. Christopher no longer lingered for breakfast, or asked how she slept. He came home late, smelling of whiskey and some perfume that didn't belong to any woman she knew. He'd breeze past her questions with tired smiles and stories about meetings, clients, and contracts. The days stretched into a blur of half-truths and unanswered calls from her bank. When she asked about the missing funds again, he waved a dismissive hand. "Mom, you're worrying too much. I told you your account is locked in an investment cycle. It'll all come back triple. Trust me." Trust. The word sounded different now, like a lock clicking shut. Miestis. The humiliation came in small, cruel doses. It started one afternoon at the pharmacy. She'd gone to refill her prescription, her usual blood pressure tablets. The young clerk scanned the card, then frowned. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. Your payments declined." Alice blinked, cheeks flushing. "That can't be right. Try it again, please." He did. Twice. The same message flashed across the screen. Transaction failed. Insufficient funds. People in line began to stare. One woman whispered, "Poor thing," as Alice fumbled through her purse for a few crumpled bills. She paid in cash, forcing a small laugh. "Must be a bank error," she murmured, though her voice shook. When she stepped out into the parking lot, tears blurred the edges of the afternoon sun. For the first time, she wondered if her son was lying. Miestis. He demanded. That night she tried to access her online account. The password no longer worked. Locked. When she asked Christopher about it, he chuckled. "Oh Mom, I changed your password for security. Didn't I tell you? Someone could hack you." He kissed her forehead and left for another late meeting. His BMW purred away into the dark taillights, glowing like eyes watching her brake. The next morning her neighbor Katie Blanchard stopped by with fresh muffins and gossip. She meant well, but her words landed like glass. "Chris has been busy, huh? I saw pictures on Facebook, him and that Foster guy renting a penthouse downtown. Fancy place, looked like a party for a king." Alice forced a smile, even as her heart twisted. A party. "Oh honey, you haven't seen it. They had champagne fountains. Everyone in town's talking about how handsome he looked in that white suit. You've raised a star." When Katie left, Alice sat by the kitchen window, staring at her hands. She pulled up Facebook and typed his name into the search bar. Her breath caught. There he was. Her son, standing on a rooftop terrace, city lights sprawling behind him, holding a glass of champagne. The caption read, "The good life only comes once." Comment after comment praised him. "Looking sharp, bro. Level up. Money talks, baby." Each word cut deeper. Her pension money had become his luxury lifestyle. Days later, a letter arrived from Evergreen Financial Institution. It wasn't addressed to Christopher, but to her. The heading read, "Notice of Overdraft. Account ending in 4,321. She read the numbers twice. Her pension account, the one her husband had helped her set up before he died. It was now in negative balance. The letter's language was clinical but cruel. "Please be advised, your account is overdrawn by $3,126. Multiple electronic transfers detected." Alice sat at the kitchen table, shaking. The walls seemed to close in, the clock ticking louder than ever. That evening Christopher returned home, carrying shopping bags, new shoes, gold cufflinks, and a cologne bottle shaped like a diamond. "Mom, you wouldn't believe the deals I got. Foster and I are taking a trip next week. Miami. Strictly business." Her lips trembled. "Chris, how can you afford this?" He grinned. "Connections, Mom. You don't get it. Money flows to people who know how to handle it." "But where did it come from?" He scoffed. "You're overthinking. You're tired. Go rest." Nias. That night, she couldn't sleep. She wandered to his old bedroom, the one that used to smell of crayons and soap. It was now littered with shopping bags, receipts, and a half-open briefcase. Inside lay a sleek tablet. On its glowing screen, she saw multiple bank notifications, transfers, withdrawals, card charges, every transaction linked to her pension account. At the bottom of one page was a saved PDF, labeled Investment Statement. She opened it and frowned. The logo was off-center. The bank name misspelled. Evergreen instead of Evergreen. Forged. Her son had forged the documents. She sank onto the bed, heart pounding. Every late night, every flashy post, every casual smile, it had all been bought with her future. When she finally rose, her eyes had hardened. She folded the forged document neatly and slipped it into her robe pocket. The next morning, while the sun broke over the roofs of Willow Creek, Alice walked down Main Street to Maple County Bank. "Good morning, ma'am," said the teller, a young woman named Ayla. "How can I help you?" Alice's voice was calm, almost too calm. "I think my son has stolen from me." The teller froze, then quietly ushered her into the branch manager's office. By the time she left, she knew the full truth: forged signatures, unauthorized transfers, luxury purchases, all tied directly to Christopher's name. Outside, the wind carried the faint smell of lilacs. Alice stood there, hands trembling, the report clutched against her chest. For the first time in her life, she realized something chilling: the boy she raised had turned her trust into a weapon and aimed it right at her. The first frost came early that year, leaving the widow's garden pale and brittle. The marigolds had withered, the grass turned gray underfoot. Inside, the house no longer smelled of cinnamon or lemon polish, but of silence. Heavy, awkward, endless silence. Alice Horne had always believed confrontation solved nothing. But now, every time she passed the framed photo of her husband, she felt his steady eyes watching her. It was as though he was asking, "How long will you let him take everything you built?" She waited until Sunday evening, when Christopher came home from another so-called business trip. His suitcase hit the floor with a thud. His skin glowed from the Florida sun, a gold chain peeked from his open collar. He looked like a man who'd just conquered the world, not one who'd stolen from his own mother. Alice waited until he'd settled on the couch with his whiskey. Then she stepped into the living room, holding the forged investment statement in both hands. "Christopher," she said softly. "I went to the bank." He froze mid-sip. "You what?" "I went to the bank," she repeated. "They showed me the transfers. The forged signature. The documents." For a moment the mask slipped. He set down his glass and leaned back, forcing a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Mom, come on, you're confused. I told you about those transfers weeks ago. It's just how investments work." Her voice stayed calm. "The manager said the company doesn't exist. Foster doesn't work for Evergreen Financial. He's a mechanic from Riverton." That one struck. His jaw tightened. "Who told you that?" "I asked around," she said, her tone still even, "and I called your father's old accountant." He looked into it. Christopher stood, pacing the room. "This is ridiculous. You're paranoid, Mom. You're letting your grief make you crazy." "Crazy," she echoed, staring at the man in front of her, the same man who used to bring her wildflowers after school and swear he'd buy her a mansion someday. "No, son, not crazy, just awake." He ran a hand through his hair, trying to recover his charm. "Look, I didn't steal anything. I borrowed. You'll get it all back, plus profit." "Why would I ever hurt you?" She said nothing, just laid the papers on the table. "Because you already did."
He
Stormed out that night, slamming the door so hard it rattled the windows. The house shook, and the old widow stood there for a long moment, listening to the quiet hum of the fridge, the only thing that hadn't left her. The next morning, she woke early, eyes swollen from tears, and began her work. Not housework, evidence work. She gathered every bank statement, every envelope, every receipt left in his room. She wrote down dates, amounts, locations. She took photos with her old digital camera, zooming in on the luxury car lease under her name, the online payment records, the phone bill charged to her account. Then she opened her tablet and visited his social media pages again. The same rooftop parties, the same champagne smiles, the same captions about hard work paying off. She took screenshots, matching each post to a withdrawal on her bank statement. Every timestamp was a confession. By evening her dining table looked like an evidence board. Her late husband's reading glasses lay beside a stack of proof that their son, their only child, had sold them out for temporary applause. When Christopher returned home 3 days later, she didn't greet him with anger. She greeted him with coffee. He eyed her warily. "So, we good now?" "We are," she said quietly. "I spoke with the bank again. They'll be sending someone over tomorrow." He laughed. "Good. Maybe they'll explain it to you better." Her eyes didn't flinch. "Yes. Maybe they will." Me. The night she couldn't sleep. The street outside was wet from rain, and the house groaned with the sound of old wood. She sat by the window, holding her husband's photo. "Harold," she whispered. "You always said to trust people to show who they are. I've seen it now." Her phone buzzed on the table, a text from Christopher. She opened it. "Chris, don't talk to the bank anymore. Foster says they might call it fraud if you keep poking around. I'll handle it. Chris, love you mom." She stared at those words, "Love you mom," and felt nothing but emptiness. Me. 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 The next morning, a knock came at the door. It was Miriam Burton, her old friend and a legal aide at the county courthouse. Alice had called her 2 nights before. Miriam took one look at the stack of papers on the table and said, "Honey, you've got enough to bury him in paperwork." But Alice shook her head. "I don't want to bury him, I just want him to stop." Miriam sighed. "Then we'll do this the right way. Quietly. You document everything. Let the authorities handle the rest." Alice nodded, though her stomach twisted with guilt. She'd never imagined her own name and her son's would appear in a fraud report. Me. Me. That evening she heard Christopher on the phone in the hallway. His voice was sharp, urgent. "Yeah, she's acting weird. If she goes to the cops, it's over. I'll fix it. Don't worry." She froze in her bedroom doorway, listening. "I'll get her to sign the papers tomorrow. Once she does, everything's clean. No one can trace it back." He didn't know she was standing behind him. Alice stepped forward slowly. "Papers. What papers?" He spun around, startled. Then he smiled. That same false, easy smile that had fooled her too many times. "Nothing, Mom. Just a non-disclosure form. It'll protect us both." Her heart broke a little more with every word. When he went to bed, she sat alone in the dark, staring at the faint glow from his room. For the first time, she wasn't afraid anymore. By morning she would have a plan, not to confront him again, but to outsmart him. The next chapter of this family's story wouldn't be written in tears. It would be written in truth, in evidence, and in the quiet fury of a mother who finally realized her greatest revenge would be exposing him, publicly, completely, and without mercy. The following Sunday felt eerily calm in Willow Creek. The air was crisp, church bells rang down the hill, and the widow's kitchen smelled faintly of apple pie and fresh varnish, a scent she hadn't bothered with since her husband died. Alice Horn had decided that if she was going to lose everything, she'd lose it on her own terms, and make sure her son lost more. The night before, she'd called Miriam Burton again. The conversation was brief but final. "I want to press charges," Alice said, her voice steady. "But I want him to show his true face first." Miriam didn't question her. She simply said, "Then let's make sure he talks." By noon, Alice had invited Christopher for dinner. He arrived in his polished BMW, humming, sunglasses glinting, phone glued to his hand. "Mom, you cooking? Smells good," he said, kissing her cheek. "What's the occasion?" She smiled gently. "Just wanted a nice meal, like old times." He grinned, tossed his coat on the chair, and wandered to the dining room. The table was set for 3. He frowned. "Who's coming?" "An old friend," she said lightly, pulling out a chair. "You remember Miriam Burton from the courthouse, don't you?" Before he could respond, the doorbell rang. Miriam walked in wearing a navy coat, carrying a small black handbag. Her tone was warm but professional. "Christopher, my goodness, it's been ages." He nodded stiffly. "Yeah. Hi." She sat across from him, setting her phone upright beside her plate. "Hope you don't mind me joining. Your mom invited me to talk about some estate planning. You know, making sure her funds are secure." His jaw twitched, but he forced a smile. "Sure, of course. Smart idea." Alice served the meal, roast chicken, potatoes, and cornbread, all her son's favorites. The mood was pleasant at first. Miriam chatted about harmless things, local elections, the weather Willow Creek's winter fare. Then midway through dessert she said softly. Alice mentioned there's been a misunderstanding with her finances. Christopher's fork froze midair. Misunderstanding. He gave a laugh that sounded practiced. Oh, it's all sorted now, just a mix-up. Miriam nodded. I see. And the bank transfers. He glanced at his mother. Mom, you've been talking to people again. Alice folded her hands. I needed help, Chris. He leaned back, forcing a calm chuckle. Help? From a lawyer? That's a bit much, don't you think? Miriam tilted her head, studying him. Depends, some people call it help. Others call it evidence gathering. His face drained of color. Alice didn't flinch. She simply picked up her tea and asked, in the same tone she used when he was a child. Chris, how much did that new car cost again? He looked at her warily. Why? Just curious, she said, smiling faintly. You said you'd bought it for business, right? Yeah, about as much as your pension, he said with a smirk. But don't worry, Mom. Investments are paying off. Miriam tapped her phone gently. Thank you, Christopher. That'll do. His eyes widened. Wait, what? She turned her screen around. The voice memo was still recording. Every word clear as glass. Alice met his gaze for the first time without fear. You stole from me, Chris. And now you've confessed. The rest of the afternoon unfolded like a slow unraveling of pride. Christopher shouted, begged, then turned venomous. You'd really destroy your own son? Alice's voice was firm, calm, final. No, Christopher, you did that yourself. He stormed out, slamming the door, tires screeching down Maple Street. But the next morning, 2 investigators from the County Financial Crimes Unit arrived at Alice's door. They took her statement, collected the forged documents, the screenshots, and Miriam's recording. One officer, a tall man named Lane Burton, assured her quietly, "We'll handle it, ma'am. He won't see this coming." And he didn't. 3 days later, in the middle of a rooftop party downtown, officers moved in. The same friends who'd cheered him online stood frozen as Christopher Horn was handcuffed beside a silver champagne bucket. Someone filmed it. Within hours the clip circulated on local news. The once proud son of Willow Creek, who flaunted designer suits and investment success, was now walking down marble stairs in cuffs, head bowed, the word fraud echoing in every corner of the room. Back in her kitchen, Alice watched the report on television. Her pie sat untouched. The anchor's voice was steady. Local businessman Christopher Horn, 35, has been arrested for defrauding his widowed mother of over $90,000. Authorities say his mother's detailed evidence and recordings led to a swift investigation. Alice turned off the TV and sat quietly for a long moment. Her reflection in the window looked older, lonelier, but freer. Outside, snow had started to fall. The garden lay covered, clean and white again. Her revenge hadn't come in shouting or breaking things. It came in silence, the kind that carried proof instead of pity. Winter hit Willow Creek hard that year. Snow blanketed the streets like quiet judgment, muffling even the sound of traffic. Inside the county courthouse, the air was sharp with the smell of paper and polished oak. Alice Horn sat on the front row, her back straight, her floral dress ironed crisp as linen on Sunday morning. Her hands trembled only when the courtroom doors opened, and Christopher was led in, her only son, shackled at the wrists, wearing the same navy suit he once bragged about buying with business profits. Now the cuffs bit into the sleeves, where gold links used to shine. His eyes met hers briefly. Then fell. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Neighbors from Maple Street, reporters from the Willow Creek Chronicle, even the pharmacist who'd once watched Alice fumble for cash. Every seat was filled. When the judge entered, silence fell like a curtain. The prosecutor, a lean woman with a steady voice, began. Your Honor, this is a case of deliberate financial exploitation. The defendant, Christopher Horn, used manipulation, forgery, and deceit to strip his widowed mother of her entire pension savings. What makes this case most tragic is not the amount, but the betrayal. Each word landed like a hammer blow. Christopher's lawyer tried to spin it otherwise. He said it was all a misunderstanding, that his client believed he had permission. He painted Christopher as a loving son with good intentions, who lacked financial judgment, not morality. But the evidence didn't lie. The forged documents were projected on a screen, her signature scanned and duplicated. The fake Evergreen Investments logo. The email thread with Foster, his so-called business partner, bragging easy money bro. Moms don't check statements anyway. The courtroom gasped. Alice didn't. She'd already read those words enough times to burn them into her memory. Then came the recording Miriam had captured over dinner. Her own voice, trembling but polite, asking, "How much did that new car cost again?" And his voice, her son's voice, laughing, "About as much as your pension, Mom." The sound echoed through the courtroom like a confession written in thunder. Christopher's shoulders sagged. When it was Alice's turn to speak, she rose slowly. The bailiff offered an arm. She refused it. Her voice, though soft, carried across every corner of the room. "I raised my boy to know the difference between need and greed. I taught him to earn what he spends, to respect what others build. I didn't think I'd live long enough to see him take from me what his father died saving." The judge watched her closely. Even Christopher lifted his head. "I'm not here because I want revenge," she continued. "I'm here because if I don't stand up, someone else's mother will be next." He thought my love meant silence. But love, real love, doesn't cover crime, it corrects it. The courtroom was silent except for the creak of wood as she sat down. After 3 hours of testimony and cross-examination, the jury returned. 12 people filed in, their faces tight and pale. The foreman stood. "We find the defendant guilty on all counts: fraud, forgery, and elder financial abuse." Christopher's head dropped into his hands. His lawyer whispered something about appeals, but he didn't respond. The judge, an older man with silver hair and steady eyes, leaned forward. "Mr. Horn, this court recognizes that your crime was not driven by poverty, but by arrogance. You stole not out of hunger, but out of vanity. You've shamed your mother, your name, and this town. I hereby sentence you to 7 years in state prison, with restitution of $93,000 to be paid upon release." Reporters scribbled furiously. Someone in the back gasped. Alice didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just closed her eyes and whispered a single sentence under her breath, words she'd repeated to herself since the beginning. "A mother's heart may forgive, but it never forgets." Outside the courthouse, snow still fell. Cameras flashed. A reporter asked, "Mrs. Horn, do you have anything to say about your son's conviction?" She paused, adjusting her scarf, her breath misting in the cold.
"Yes,"
she said softly. He thought my silence was weakness. But it was preparation. The quote made the next morning's headline. Her only son stole her pension, she exposed him and he went to prison. In the months that followed, Alice rebuilt what was left. The court arranged partial restitution. Her community, once full of whispers, turned into a net of quiet support. The church ladies dropped by often. Miriam helped her set up a new pension account, this time with 2-factor authentication and no shared access. But Alice didn't stop there. She began volunteering every Wednesday afternoon at the Maple County Senior Center, teaching free classes on financial safety for retirees. She stood before groups of gray-haired men and women, holding up a bright binder labeled "Protect What's Yours." Her tone was firm, practical. Never let love blind you to numbers. Never sign what you don't read, and never be afraid to speak the truth, even if the truth sits at your own kitchen table. They listened spellbound. Her humiliation had become her power. Every now and then, she received a letter from Christopher. The first few were full of excuses and promises. Then came apologies. Then silence. On quiet nights, she would sit by the window with her tea, looking out at the garden her husband had planted decades ago. Snow still covered the marigolds, but spring always found its way back. She didn't hate her son, but she no longer mourned him either. Because in a way the man she'd raised, the good boy with wildflowers and promises, had died long before the judge spoke his sentence. What remained was a truth she carried like armor, that love without accountability is just permission dressed as devotion. They say silence is golden, but for Alice Horn, silence was the weapon that won her justice. Her only son stole her pension, she exposed him, and he went to prison. And in the stillness that followed, she found peace not in vengeance, but in the quiet knowledge that truth always outlasts betrayal.